I met Jake O'Donnell a while back when he was developing this insane off-road S14. I asked him for me to feature it, but at the time, it just wasn't quite ready yet. He did give me a little preview as I had a chance to go for a ride, but most of the body panels were missing and the suspension was not dialed in, which means, of course, we couldn't take it off any sweet jumps. About half a year goes by and his prerunner S chassis just came out of the paint shop. He reached out to me and we met up in the desert. While it looked apart from the outside, Jake wanted to show me that it wasn't all show and no go. He took me out in the whoops and just a few jumps to show off what it's really capable of.
But just step both feet in like this.
Yeah.
Drop your butt onto the door bar and then kind of fall down into the seat.
Got it. Oh, the intake's right here?
Yes. Yeah. It's
okay.
It's gonna be real loud in the car.
I say this a lot, but I'm actually blown away right now. It's unlike anything I've ever ridden in.
That's a win in my book.
It's just like the full experience, right? It's like the power, the suspension, how fast you can go over the whoops, and also the sound. It's the most unique off-road sound I've ever heard because the sound is literally coming from where my feet are.
The whole reason why I even turboed this motor was the nostalgia of it being an S chassis. It was like, I kind of felt like it was mandatory, and it came out way better than I expected just because of how loud it is in the car. It's like, I mean, it literally sounds like you're in a jet. It's pretty crazy.
It definitely does not feel like any other S chassis I've ever ridden in. Was it a running, driving vehicle when you got it?
No, so I bought it as a guy had started a project. He did, it was an aluminum block 5.3 LS with some, nice parts on it, and he never finished it. So it was like halfway caged. It had some suspension parts, and like I said, he wouldn't sell me just the motor, so I bought the whole car to get the engine, basically.
So you essentially saved the car.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like you destroyed a S chassis for this.
No, and it was cut up when I got it. It had like aftermarket front fenders and a bumper and stuff on it, and it was partially tubed in the front. The cage was halfway done with. That's why. So these door bars are actually, you probably recognize them if you guys know enough drift stuff. This is totally like a drift spec cage. I left the door bars there, and I built off of the existing cage and added, the whole back half and a bunch of tubes to the cage. But these were in it when I got it. I wanted to see if I could back half a car because I taught myself how to fabricate building this car. So this is the first thing I've ever done as far as like, a tube chassis or bending and notching tubes. Like I learned how to do the fab work as I built this. And I figured if I could successfully back half it and get the tube work right, then I'd pay somebody or have someone do I-beams and figure the suspension out for me. So pretty much the whole build I've done myself except for the I-beams and the steering was done by a shop.
And this is pretty much like I wouldn't say the final version. I'm assuming that there's probably still some things that you want to do to it, but this is finally painted like a complete version. Part of it is because I've been bugging you for a while now to feature this vehicle.
Yeah.
And I've seen it in so many different stages, unpainted and whatever, things that you're trying out, wires everywhere, no dash.
Yep.
But now it's finally at a stage where it's for you, I'm
Yeah,
assuming
I mean,
pretty presentable
so
to
nothing-
showcase the work.
Right, exactly. I mean, nothing's ever done, of course, but it's I'd say it's like 90% there. I mean, there's a few things I want to work out. I'd like to change the design of the front suspension a little bit to get some more wheel travel in the front, because right now the back outperforms the front. But really, it's 90% done, you know, and it's finally did the bodywork. So like the fenders took me a month of messing with fiberglass and shaping them. I did that myself too, and it was just
The front fenders.
The front fenders. I did the Silvia front conversion just because I really like the S15 front end, and I did that way back in the first generation.
It's just a couple pieces to make it a S15.
Yes.
I'm assuming it's the hood that is fiberglass.
Yes.
The headlights, which there's not much left.
So I skinned them, and this is just a shell.
Yeah.
And then it's dusty. But on the inside, I've got LED bars that are mounted to the cage work, and then these are just simulating a headlight.
And then this is like an aftermarket.
Yeah, aftermarket fiberglass bumper. And then the front fenders that I bought. So these are two separate fenders that I've meshed together. So it's basically, it's a S14.5 aftermarket fiberglass fender. So it's got the door line of the 240 with the headlight pocket of the S15. Now the outside, the flared part of this is off of a Ford Ranger, or it's an aftermarket Ford Ranger flare.
No way.
I basically cut the body line off the Ranger hood, and then cut the outside of the S15 fender, and then stuck them together. And then I just did all the glass work to make them look like they're supposed to be one. So I shaped the whole headlight pocket here myself. Same thing with kind of bringing the fender body line up into the A-pillar. That was all just trying to make it look like it's supposed to be on the car.
This is a stock door.
Yes.
And then the rocker is stock.
Yep.
And then so now this is where it gets crazy. What the hell is this from?
So that is a Ford Ranger bedside that I cut the front off of, and I cut the front half of the bed off to kind of match the shape of the body here. And from here back, it's still Ford Ranger, and that's why I put just, you know, like a block out plate where your taillight would go, just so I didn't want it to look like a Ford Ranger. It's designed to be used. I prefer it to get beat up, and I don't want it to sit on a trailer and not get beat up. That's not why I built it.
So then, did you guys do the paint too?
Me and my neighbor, we did all of the bodywork ourselves. I had a buddy of mine actually spray the car, but we brought it to him basically prepped, and then I told him I wanted, like, you know, one thing better than a one-day Mako spray, and it's single stage paint, just like I said, basic paint job. But he pulled the doors, he did the door jams, so it's it's the inside of the door jams are painted. It's just a little bit better than like a typical one-day spray.
How much of it is tube and how much of it is S chassis left?
S chassis, we have basically firewall,
Yep.
most of the floor, and then the cab, the doors, and the quarter panels are cut like right about here, kind of like a swoop up to the back, just where the bedside meets up. Underneath, it's skeletonized and empty. That's pretty much all that's left that's S chassis. I did keep the OEM firewall. Like I said, most of the floor, the doors. Ideally, it's kind of like the S chassis version of what they call like a door banger in off-road racing. So like a 1450 Ford Ranger, it's more or less tube chassis, but a little bit of OEM frame, and then a steel cab with working doors. The way I built this is I actually started with a 2x3 3/16 rectangular, frame, and I put a frame underneath the unibody because, S chassis is a unibody. So I started with that, and then basically just started tubing off of those two, frame rails.
It's almost like you repurposed a truck frame, but it's just raw material that you used.
Exactly, and that's what a lot of people ask. I think it's like, is that just a body on a Ford Ranger or whatever? But it is a custom chassis, and it is very similar to like what a Ford Ranger would be. It's a little shorter wheelbase, but it's, as far as suspension mounting location and the design of the suspension, it's very similar to what a Ford Ranger or an off-road, truck would be.
In terms of travel, like what are we talking here?
So in the rear, it's bumped and strapped at 24 inches. And then in the front, it is bumped and strapped at about 18. The rear's got bigger shocks. We got a Fox 3.5 5.2 bypass shock in the rear, and then the fronts are 2.5 coilover and bypass. It's about as much as I think it needs for being such a small car. And,
if I just showed somebody this scene right here, there's no way they would know what this is.
No, they'd say it's a truck for sure.
Yeah, they'd say it's just like some two-wheel drive prerunner.
Yeah, that's basically what it is with the S chassis body.
Right. You did all of this tube work here.
I did, yeah.
Absolutely amazing.
So it's kind of funny too, my welds, if you don't look too close, but if you look real close, as they work back to the back of the car, the welds get progressively better, because as I built this, I got better at fabricating. It's kind of funny, but it's cool because it shows the progression.
You're using a lot of Camberg stuff on here.
Yeah, so the rear end is Camberg. It's basically a trophy truck rear axle. It's a 40 spline full float with a 10-inch TT ring gear.
And so what about the brakes?
They're just Willwood super lights and 4 pistons all the way around. Nothing super big power. The car's light for an off-road car. All the S chassis guys that are watching this are gonna think this is crazy because it's heavy for a car, but it's about 4,000 pounds. And for an off-road car of this stature, it's pretty light.
I mean, it's almost 1,000 pounds just for all the wheels and tires alone, right?
I mean, yeah, wheels, tires, and shocks are a big part of it, and the rear end obviously is really heavy. It is an iron block engine too. There's a lot of weight that could be saved, but again, it didn't need to be. So with the fuel cell and the 2 spares behind the axle, it gets a lot of weight in the back. So ideally with an off-road car, you're looking for a weight balance, and I wanted to push as much weight to the back as I could to offset the heavy engine in the front. As far as moving forwards, these are transmission coolers, both of them. I started with one, and then I actually had a transmission built, and he recommended more, so I just bridged them. So it just literally loops through one and then into the other. And then this is a trunk that I built. And I put the pack out thing on there for tools and also my ice chest mounts to it, but this is on quick pins. And if let me see if I can get these guys out. It's all get tight when it's dusty. And then so I put it on hinges, and then so it's got 2 batteries inside, and then if I was out on like a desert trip, I'd throw a soft bag full of tools and tow strap and some stuff would go inside there.
How functional and how practical.
I just tried to utilize as much space as I could. It was kind of dead space, and I figured if I could store something, because the inside there's just enough room for 2 people, and that's it. So if I could find somewhere to put stuff, it's it works out pretty good.
Amazing. You have quite the fire. You have 2 fire bottles, and then you also have a suppression system, huh?
Yeah, so the suppression system's not actually done yet. I still need to run all the lines, but it's a 5-nozzle system. So when I'm done with it, it'll have 1 sprayer on the fuel cell, 1 at the passenger, 1 at the driver, then 2 in the engine compartment. And that's why I have all the extra fire extinguishers too, is just because that's not done yet.
So then you made all of this stuff.
I did, yeah. And it's kind of funny, I actually have a plasma table now, but when I built this, I didn't. So that overlay plate and everything actually hand cut with a plasma torch. And it's one of the things I've kind of talked about wanting to cut out and redo, but it's functional. And so it's kind of like, just be a waste of time to cut it out and not enjoy the car right now. But
I do think it's cool to see your progression of fabrication, but also I love the fact that you learned how to do so much stuff building this vehicle. I think that's great. I think that is so cool.
It's been really enjoyable building the car for sure. And each stage has just been kind of like a bigger wow factor.
So there is so much going on here. I'm just looking at the inner fender well of the passenger side. Did you have to beat this in a lot?
Yeah, there's about 10 inches taken out of the original fender well and firewall. That's pushed back for clearance so when you're bumped and turned right, this the tire will be completely up inside of here.
Did you get Fox to build you custom shocks for this, or what did you do for?
No, so these are so you can buy, like prerunner series or race series shocks that are any length and diameter that you need. These have been valved and sprung by Kevin with Dialed Shock Prep. So I bought these shocks used and then basically got everything set up and functional, and then he went through them and valved them and set it up right for the car.
It's cool to see where the S chassis is, where like
you can
parts
see where
of
it used to be. Like this is factory firewall here,
mm-hmm.
and then this is intake tube goes through the firewall, so that's where the air filter by your feet was.
Yeah, and then you can see all of your chassis work here coming out here, which basically holds all the front.
Yeah, and this work here on the frame, this was done by the shop. It's Wide Open Customs. They built the I-beams, and they also did the frame plating and the shock towers, just because I don't know enough about I-beams to even attempt trying to get the geometry correct and make the steering functional.
Right,
so I let them do that.
Do they do the rears too?
They built the trailing arms. But I built, I mounted them and I put them on the car.
This is insane, the I-beam setup. What do they say when you told them you wanted them to do this?
They were all over it. They love the idea, and they're kind of on the same page with me, where it's like, the more unique it is, the cooler. And they're the shop that has my truck as well, and they're building my Ranger. So we have a very long time relationship as far as not just being my fab shop, but also being friends.
Yeah.
So when I told them I wanted to do this, they were like, basically dropped what they were doing and were all over it, and they knocked it out real quick.
What is the steering from then?
So the steering it's basically a power steering box off of like a truck. It's either I think it's an old Bronco box, but this is called a double swing setup or double swing steering, and it's all custom. So they made the swingers, they made all the the tie rods that cut across in front of the I-beams.
This is just like a complete foreign language for me. Like looking at this, I don't even know where to begin. It's just so crazy looking. Like this arm's going that way, and this pivot's here. It's crazy.
It's a big thing in the off-road world. I-beams, they've been kind of been the hot ticket for a long time. It was originally it was the cheap way to get big travel, because you could get like a Ford Ranger that comes with I-beams, and you could cut and extend them, and that was kind of the hot ticket. This is obviously a little beyond that with it being fully custom fabricated I-beams, but I did it just because I like the idea of a unique build with unique suspension components. And my Ranger that I have is center mounted A-arms, so it's a different design. But just again, if I'm gonna have two different toys in the desert, I wanted to have two different styles, two different things to compare, and just kind of experience everything there is to offer with different designs.
Hey, if you like what you're watching, do me a favor, go check out the Hagerty Drivers Club. 24/7 roadside assistance with flatbed towing, subscription to our award-winning magazine, and more. Sign up today, links in the description.
This is a Iron Block 6.0, and Millennium Motorsports built the bottom end. It's forged pistons, rods, the whole nine down there, and then it's got AFR heads, and everything was built to withstand 1,000 horsepower. So it's overbuilt, undertuned, hopefully, to achieve reliability. So it's 76 millimeter turbo. It's tuned at wastegate pressure. It's only 7 PSI on the max, and honestly, it's hard to even drive it at that. It's somewhere north of 700 horsepower at the flywheel. When it comes into boost, it just blows the tires off, and it's hard to control. And especially, in the sand, it'll be a rocket ship, but in the normal dirt, it's anything more would be undrivable. So it's
what a setup though. Like it's just so cool. Like the turbo side here is just so cool to look at. So then you've had a chance to shake this down quite a bit before it's gotten to this point then.
Yes, yeah. So if you pull up an old clip of when I took you for a ride in it the day I tuned it, that was like the absolute maiden voyage day. And that was the first time driving it with the turbo motor and everything. And that's probably been almost 2 years ago, I think. And half of that is because, doing it myself, I only have so much time. I work a full-time job, and I, do this as a hobby. So it's not like I could wrench on it all day, every day. So it takes a long time to, go from start to finish. But it's finally to the point where it was worth getting a hold of you.
So then, like, what were some of the teething issues that you had to deal with while you were building it? And then you went to test it and something wasn't right? Like, was there anything that really stands out to you?
So the very first drive in it, the suspension was way too soft. It was sprung basically 250 pounds too light in the front. So when you come into some whoops and stuff, it would plow the front bumper and it actually hit the ground, and then dust would fly over the hood. And it wasn't too bad in the car. It wasn't like real jarring, but it was an issue. That was probably number one. And then after that, the only issue I've had mechanically is I've had problems with power steering. I've gone through, this is the 4th power steering pumps. I've gone through 3 OEM power steering pumps, and I finally said, let's do this right. I talked to Charlie at Power Steering Solutions, and he set me up with a better power steering pump. I got a massive reservoir with a filter on the bottom, and then a huge power steering cooler that's actually tucked back here. If you look in the fender, well, you can see it. It's behind the bumper on the inside, but it's
oh wow,
it's a big power steering cooler, and it upped the capacity. So I think it holds like 2.5 quarts of power steering fluid now, which is a ton. And so far, I haven't had any issues since then.
You have the radiator in the front, which
Yeah.
I'm really surprised that it's a front radiator setup.
Yeah, mainly for size is the reason why. The back of the car is so crowded and small with the shape of the car, there wasn't really room for it. And on top of that, the first radiator, so I guess that's one other thing I've had an issue with. The first radiator I had in this car was even a little bit bigger than this. And I don't know what happened, but it got a hole in it. It was in one of the channels that couldn't be fixed. So I bought this one. It's a tad smaller, and it fit a little bit better. The other one was pretty tight when you close the hood, it touched and stuff. So that's been redone. But ultimately, moving it to the back of the car would help a little bit with weight balance, but it's it's already done like this, and it fits. So.
And then you just have the intercooler in the front here.
Yep. So that's standard intercooler for a traditional turbo setup. There's an oil cooler sandwiched in between
It just looks so cool with this up front. So these are 35s. Is like this is the setup that.
So the ultimate goal is actually to go to a 37.
Okay.
So the rear will already clear. When I built the back half, I built it with the previous tires off my truck, and they were 37s. The front was built around the 35, so I'm a little limited with steering. But like I said, I do want to redesign the I-beam and change it. And when I do that, they're going to get a little wider, a little bit taller, and give me that clearance for a 37.
And real bead locks.
Yeah.
It's already insane enough. I love the fact that you saved like a unloved project. You know, like you said, this is all how it came. Did you add to the cage at all?
Yeah, so the bar that's right in front of you, the one that comes down vertically,
yeah.
I added that because I didn't like how shallow this tube here was. And so I added this guy just because if I were to come into the top, you know, and take an impact here, I didn't want that to collapse towards the driver or the passenger.
Understood.
So I added this guy here, and then I also added this one that goes down through the floor and that lands on top of the frame. So it just gives it that vertical support all the way through down to the top of the frame. And then obviously I added these tubes, I added the tubes on the roof. None of these 3 bars were here. And then the B pillar only had a harness bar, so I added all the cross bracing.
Right, all of this stuff collects to the middle right here.
Yes,
right?
Yeah, exactly. And then down below, which you can't see anymore, but there's actually from frame rail to frame rail, there's a 2x2 boxed channel that is the bottom of the B pillar. And I put all that in. So I basically cut out what was existing and then strengthened the B pillar, because that's your center support of the whole car.
And then you made all of this dash stuff?
Yeah, and I'm not actually 100% done yet. So I know a bunch of people are probably going to talk about all the tech screws that are in there. Those are going to get pulled out, and I'm going to do, you know, nutserts with the button head screw on everything that holds it all together. But this was kind of a quick put it all together, but hopefully make the panels that are going to stay. And then I just haven't gotten around to actually finishing it. But yeah, this is all stuff I did at my house too.
So tell me about the transmission.
So it's a Turbo 400. Mike's transmission went through it and did a billet manual valve body. It's got a billet torque converter and basically all the goodies to withstand 1,000 horsepower. I just went in and talked to him and said, hey, I need something that's going to hold up to big power. And he built it, and they dyno tuned it at their shop at like 1,100 horsepower, and it was bulletproof. So it's you know, knock on wood, it's been solid so far, and I expect it to last a really long time.
So 3-speed.
Yep.
What is this geared for?
So it's actually geared pretty low for an off-road car because it's got big power and it's lightweight. It's got 456s in the rear end, so it'll do about 75 miles an hour in second. And then third gear is, you know, if you're cruising, you can throw it in third gear and keep the RPM down and not be spooling the turbo constantly. But this turbo setup's actually pretty small too. It's a 7681, so on the exhaust side it spools up pretty quick. It comes in to boost to like 3,300 RPMs. So
a lot of rugged radio goodies too. You got
Yep.
the helmet blower, the audio or communication
yeah,
stuff.
so I've got the 6100R race. That's just helmet to helmet, and then I actually right now I just have a temporary radio in here so that we could talk outside of the vehicle. But primarily, it was my original plans were just to have communication to and from the driver to the passenger.
And is all Holley electronics?
Yep. So Holley Terminator X complete system wiring harness, the dash, and then I had my friend Wes. He's killer tune. He's got a dyno shop out by Willow Springs, and he actually tuned the car.
And this, my favorite thing,
The screamer
is the fact that the intake is right at my foot well. It honestly makes so much sense.
I
Like,
mean,
where else would you put it?
yeah, up in the engine bay would have been a lot worse for dust. If this was a sealed cab or close to a sealed cab, it'd be even better. It still gets really dirty just because the dust comes in the windows and stirs around in the car. But I figured my original mentality or reason why I did it was because I thought putting it in the cab would be best for, you know, potentially picking up the cleanest air.
The light setup here is pretty cool too. I love that the bracing goes through the sunroof. Yeah. I think that's hilarious.
So this will eventually get paneled in. We're going to do an aluminum panel and you know, so it looks more finished. And then this is adjustability too. So you can rotate this bar to rise or lower the bar. And yeah, they're really bright. So they're just nothing special, just a basic LED light, and they're the same as what's on the front bumper and also hidden inside the headlights too. So we've got the eyeball inside the lens, and then there's a little bar to kind of simulate like an LED look. So when these are on, it looks like a complete headlight.
Do you think this is kind of like a part of a bigger movement when it comes to building off-road vehicles? Because you might be the first with the S chassis, but you're not the first with these type of builds.
Right. Yeah, I'm definitely not the first to do something unique or original. I know there's another S chassis that had a lift kit and big tires and stuff on it too. I'm not the only person to ever do that. This is definitely the furthest anyone's ever gone with functional suspension. I don't know if I'd say it's starting a wave of new builds, but I definitely think that the style is in right now for unique stuff and old pickup truck cabs, and there's a lot of really nice builds that are full tube chassis off-road race vehicles, but with like a 70s Ford pickup truck body, and then it's they look like an old truck, but it's a race car underneath. And I don't know. I mean, it'd be cool to see if anybody else does anything else like this. I've seen some stuff similar. I saw a 350Z that was put on top of a Can-Am chassis, which is obviously not as unique or custom as doing something full chassis build, but it's still has that same idea as far as bringing JDM stuff into the desert.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool. It's different.
It just makes me happy because there's actually a lot of S chassis left in this.
There's more than most people think, and that's the thing. I get all the comments where it's like somebody will say, "Oh, it's only thing left is doors and a windshield," and it's like, yeah, I mean, sort of. But if you look closer, it's got firewall, it's got floors, it's got the chassis was built around a complete S14 shell, and as I built it, I cut more and more out. But when I first started building this, it was it had everything. I mean, it was basically a complete car. And
it still has the essence of it. I mean, when you look at it, it's unmistakable.
For sure, and that was the ultimate goal. I wanted to make sure that it was recognizably a S chassis, and I took my love for the off-road because I grew up racing dirt bikes, and I'm into the off-road truck thing, and basically said, how can I mesh the two, and this is what we got.